Hello my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today we're going to be talking about the Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky. Now, I've briefly mentioned this place before in one of my previous videos. That video is called 3 Ghosts Caught on Camera. And in it I showed an image of what was believed to be a nurse who used to work on the premises who died there, and it's just largely believed that it's her image that is in this photograph. And it was just really chilling, and ever since then I've thought about this place and I've wanted to learn more about it. So today we're going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into it. First, I'll give you a bit of history about the building itself, and then we'll talk about some of the spooky things that are said to roam the halls even to this day. And some people say it's one of the most haunted places in the world. So let's get into it. First of all, back in the early 1900s in Jefferson County in Kentucky, there was a big outbreak of tuberculosis. Now, tuberculosis was a very, very terrible disease. It was referred to as the White Plague, and it really took a toll on a lot of people. There was no cure for it, so, if you got it, chances were it was going to be fatal. So this building was bought. It was a 2-story building, and it was originally bought. The land was bought and a school was built on it. And then eventually in, I believe, 1910, it opened up as a tuberculosis sanatorium. And like I said, it was 2 stories, and it was built to keep 40 to 50 tuberculosis patients at a time. And the thing about this place too that I read was, once you got there, you stayed there. And that didn't just include the patients, it also included the staff. And so when we get into some of the weird things that happened, I feel like that plays an important part in it, the isolation. And maybe some of the really tragic things that happened because of that isolation. Because of course, if you're stuck somewhere, cabin fever's a thing. If you're stuck somewhere and you can't leave, that eventually takes a very drastic toll on your mental health, on your general well-being. And I feel like you could go a little crazy. So, Now, the hospital was eventually closed in 1961 when the antibiotic, which essentially cured tuberculosis, streptomycin, I believe that was called, once that antibiotic was discovered or created, it really eradicated tuberculosis for the most part. And the hospital just wasn't needed anymore after that. So it was closed down. After the sanatorium itself closed down, it was reopened as a geriatric center where, old people would go to receive care at the ends of their lives. And that was closed down shortly thereafter, I think in the early 80s, because it came to light that the patients, these old people who were going there to, end their life with care and with safety, were being badly mistreated. So I feel like between the sanatorium and then the geriatric center, there were just so many nasty things happening in that building that it just makes sense that now, decades later, there's still so much trapped energy lingering in that building. So back when the sanatorium opened, there of course was no real cure for tuberculosis. So the doctors really just got in there and did what they could to try to help the patients as much as they could, make them comfortable. And in the process, they were also trying to, of course, come up with a cure. So they were doing all different kinds of really nasty sounding procedures to these patients with the hopes that it would cure their illness, when a lot of the time it actually ended up being fatal and the patient would die anyway. And they were doing things, well, first of all, a lot of the doctors thought that sunlight and fresh air would cure it. So they'd put the patients up on the roof and just leave them out there for hours and hours at a time. Then inside the operating room, things were going even crazier. The doctors had, they were basically experimenting on these patients, which is so horrifying to think of. So some things they were doing is they would insert balloons into their lungs and try to blow them up inside the patients. They were removing ribs and muscle tissues from the chest cavities of the patients with the hopes that that would allow the damaged lungs to have more room to heal and just room to breathe. Just all kinds of crazy things that were not working and were causing the patients, I'm sure, much more pain and discomfort than they should have had to endure. Along with that, there were so many casualties in the sanatorium that they needed to come up with a way to dispose of the patients once they passed. And people were dying at such a rate that they knew they couldn't carry the bodies through the hospital because that would really lower morale. So they developed this like chute system where they would shoot the bodies down and they'd go through a tunnel that emptied out by some train tracks, and then like a train would come, pick them up, and then dispose of them. Like, that's just so disturbing to think of. It just makes my blood run cold, and it makes me think, like, where were the families of these people? What were they told? Anything like that. Like, what was going on? And a really unsettling fact is it wasn't just the patients who were passing away in the sanatorium. Like I mentioned at the beginning, that photograph with what's believed to be a nurse captured on it. This particular nurse, it's said that room 502 was cursed, and a lot of bad things happened to staff that worked there. And one such nurse, she ended up passing away in the room, and it appeared as though she'd taken her own life. And people say that that was attributed to depression, which, like I mentioned earlier too, feels to me like that isolation would have something to do with that as well. Another woman who worked in 502, she ended up jumping off the roof. Like, that's such a drastic way to go. We heard about that too at the Baker Hotel, a woman doing that, and it's really unsettling. As for that nurse, there's no rhyme or reason as to why she did it. There's no record of it. Some people think that maybe she was pushed, but that was never proven, and there was never really anybody who had any reason that we know of to do that. So it's just really unsettling. Some of the other ghosts that are said to be wandering the halls of the Waverly Hills Sanatorium are, one is an old lady, and let me just pull it up here. I'm just going to read the paragraphs for the ghost so that I can get it just right. But one of the saddest ghost stories is that of an elderly woman who supposedly roams the hospital, moaning and bleeding from her chained hands and feet. Though she cries for help when outsiders approach her, she runs away. And then it says here, one of the more well-known ghosts at Waverly Hills is a little boy known as Timmy. And Timmy was around 6 or 7 years old when he died in the hospital. Since he died with his whole life ahead of him, his spirit can't move on. And I was reading that too, like, a lot of times when it's a child spirit, they don't know, they don't understand what's happened, and they have trouble moving on. And so he's just kind of stuck there. And it says he just wanders the hospital trying to have fun. Visitors often bring balls for him to play with, and many claim they see the balls moving, seemingly on their own. Believers in Timmy say it's him, while skeptics say the balls are moving thanks to either the wind or uneven flooring. And then there's another story that the whole place is haunted by this entity that's gotten itself the name of the Creeper. And it says, if you've ever felt an overwhelming feeling of doom that you can't explain, you might have come across a being like the Creeper. The Creeper is a dark, terrifying entity that crawls along the floors and the walls of Waverly Hills. Some believe it's an otherworldly spirit, while others believe it's a human spirit that's been twisted by the trauma of death. Whatever its true nature, those who encounter it are inevitably filled with dread. And then the final bit of sort of ghostly type things happening there is Something that's seen frequently there are doppelgangers, and if you saw my video, I have a dedicated video on doppelgangers. It's one of my favorite paranormal ones that I've made. It's creepy. So it says here, doppelgangers, also known as double walkers, are a type of spirit that can mimic the appearance, voice, and mannerisms of anything or anyone it encounters. This can mean looking across the room and seeing an exact replica of yourself, or watching what appears to be your sister strangle a cat, even though she loves cats. Guides at Waverly Hills have reported seeing doppelgangers of themselves and of others in some cases. The doppelgangers were almost identical, except for black holes where the eyes should be. So terrifying. I also read too, a couple of days ago, that there was a group called I think it was the Jefferson Ghost Tour Society or something like that. Once they went in there to do a tour, and they went into where the cafeteria used to be, and it was just complete shambles. Tables turned over, chairs tipped, like just everything was a mess, and there was no explanation for it. There was no reason for that room to look like that, and it's just, again, very chilling. Anyway, you guys, that's gonna do it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Very creepy. Let me know if you've ever been to see it, gone inside it. I think they do tours there, I think. Although correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, if you live anywhere near Kentucky, or if you've heard any stories about it, do let me know. And yeah, I hope you guys are having a great day, and I will see you on Friday with another book talk video. Bye guys.